All right. Hello. Welcome. It's Friday. You finished your week off. You did it. You nailed it. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you didn't nail anything. Maybe you tripped over yourself on Monday and you've been stubbing your toe ever since. Maybe you made the most money you've ever made in your entire life. Maybe you fell in love this week. Maybe you had a kid. Either way, it's Friday. It's time for the calm down. I'm going to tell you about 3 things that I'm pretty sure you haven't heard before. I'm Thomas. Let's relax. Let's do this. Let's get the weekend started right. Thanks for coming. Story number 1 is from 1924 in Portugal, where a man, I'm going to read his name out loud so I say it correctly. All right. His name was Arthur Vigilio Alves Reis, R-E-I-S. That's his last name. This man is arguably the single greatest fraudster in the history of the world. Because in 1924, he didn't steal money. He didn't steal bank plates. He didn't steal a car. He didn't steal resources. He instead made a fraudulent version of the agreement between the Portuguese government and London, where they printed the money, and made it look like he had the right to a bunch of money, according to the Portuguese government and the British government. So he went there and he had 100 million units of their, at the time, currency printed out. Legal banknotes, just unauthorized. Took it back to Portugal, lived like a rich man, but his greed brought so much money into the Portuguese economy, it collapsed the entire economy. And as a result, people took over. Tyrants, dictators, opportunists, authoritarians, because that's what happens when the entire economy collapses, no matter where it is, and people get scared and worried and afraid, and they just want to shore up their family. And the person who comes along and offers them a fixed point where they'll get their rice, they'll get their bread, they'll get their fruit, and they'll be left alone, ends up taking over. And sure enough, this one man's brilliant fraud that he went to do in a different country against Portugal ended up bottoming him out the entire economy. And the country was thrust into authoritarian rule for about 4 decades. Now that is a crime. Story number 2 is in Germany in 1184, where the king at the time wanted to settle a dispute between an archbishop and a grave land owner. There was a big to-do. They couldn't figure it out. The entire thing was going to blow up, and the king said, okay, we are going to come to the monastery in your region, and we are going to sort out this problem. Word got out. All the nobles, the knights, all of the higher-ups, all of the sons and the daughters of the royals, they came to this monastery. And the way that they were built at the time was you have the bottom floor, which is either where the animals are or where you have storage or where everything that you go to the bathroom with goes. And on the next floor, which technically would be the first story, the first floor, that is actually the base level. So everybody went in, lined up, got in a circle, whatever. I don't know how they stood or they sat. I'm sure they sat. A lot of people sat. I'm sure there were tickets sold. I mean, God was there, right? It was an archbishop. Before they could settle the dispute, you have to remember this is 1164. People are coming in chainmail. People are coming in full knight garb and regalia. And it is the event of the entire country, so everybody is in their Sunday finest. So they pile in, family after family, region after region, and now everybody's finally in there. And as they're about to sort it out, the floor starts cracking. Because all the knights are wearing their chainmail. They are all with sword and metal helmet. Everybody weighs a ton. And the floor gave out, and all the nobles and all the royals fell through the floor. And you remember what I said about the bottom floor was where you put stuff, stored stuff, had animals, or where all the stuff from the toilet went? Well, in this monastery, it was where all the toilet stuff went. So about 60 royals and nobles ended up drowning in feces. because they fell through the floor and were in full night get-up and drowned under the weight of their own armor or the people who landed on top of them. And 60 people of the aristocratic persuasion drowned in Pooh because of an archbishop and a gravesite owner not being able to sort out their business. But now the archbishop had like 60 people to bless and funerals to have, and the grave landowner had 60 new plots he got paid for. So it kind of worked out, didn't it? Could you imagine that? Going to an event, falling through the floorboards, and slowly, gradually sinking into Pooh because you're covered in armor, just like if you fell off your horse and landed in water. You're done. Amazing. Maybe that's where a lot of German fetishes have come from. Story 3 is something that kind of blew my mind. So in the carboniferous, carbon-ish time, about 300 million years ago, trees developed this, it was like a protein, an enzyme, it was a bacteria that allowed them to grow tall, right? Trees weren't always growing tall like that. And eventually they would fall, of course. But what we know now is fungi and bacteria has developed the ability to eat through trees. So a tree falls and gradually, the forest consumes it and recycles its matter. Back then, bacteria and fungi hadn't developed the ability to eat away at trees yet. So they would just fall and fall and fall and fall until there were miles, literal miles of trees that had fallen over millions of years, just laying there, drying out, incapable of rotting. Consider that. Consider what our forests would look like if the first tree that fell and the next 10 never rotted away. They were just still there. You'd be having California wildfires everywhere. And sure enough, there were wildfires that even the most possessed Californian would look at and think were bad. There were wildfires that were so severe you actually couldn't breathe anywhere within the continental US. This is 300 million years ago, and eventually, obviously now, this bacteria and fungi has developed the ability to eat away and rot wood, and thereby recycling the energetic matter. But the thing that I thought was fascinating was almost all of the coal that we use today is actually ashed trees that burned when they were laying on top of each other for long enough, and there was a lightning storm and it struck some of the dried out wood that couldn't rot, and then everything lit on fire. That has literally created all of the coal we use today. So the bacteria and the fungi that was incapable of rotting out the wood has provided us with fuel source in our area, in our era. Has provided us with a fuel source in our era. That might be what I was trying to say. What's fascinating to me is the biggest organism in the world is also a fungi, and it's in the Pacific Northwest. And if the global temperature changes a little bit, then it can actually send its spores out. Right now, it's not able to do that. But clearly, for 300 million years, fungi had a problem to work out, and then it did, and then it balanced out the world. And that was trees. We consider trees universally good, right? Photosynthesis, they create our air. Well, this fungi at some point in time may also mutate and figure out a way to send out its spores. And then I promise you, we're done for. And it would be the next rebalancing of this planet. So the coal that we use for our barbecues actually tell a far, far more interesting story than we let it believe. Let the coal believe? Is that what clean coal is? It has beliefs? Clean coal has beliefs? My gosh. Anyway, this has been The Calm Down. It's been a pleasure. As always, here are 3 stories that you didn't know about. Coal, where it came from and all the forest fires of yore. The falling through the floor and drowning in feces. And then maybe also, potentially, the grim reality of greed from one man who prints out all the money, spends it on himself, and then collapses an economy and a nation into 4 decades of strife from authoritarianism. Tisk, tisk. Have a good weekend.